Hey Taylor, Daniel from Bandits. Keep calling in. Actually, calling in response to Jason's call. Partially about the solo gaming. I get it. Well, first of all, I'm with you. I've also been solo gaming and I've been recording them. So, what's funny is, or maybe not funny, haha, but funny, interesting is that I do have a regular YouTube, solo game that I do, but I also still play some without recording. I find that it's very liberating to just play. And anytime that you put any pressure on yourself, whether it be the podcasting or the blogging, it can, it can motivate us, I guess, on some level, but it can also take some of the fun out of it. So I think that if you are doing something for fun, sometimes not connecting it to what I'll call work can be a great thing.
Yeah, guilty as charged. A couple of years ago, when I was running Ash Coast games, that was the apex of content for me. When I first started the blog, I was very intentional about blogging every week. Uh, and I was proud of myself because I kept that up for years. When I started the podcast, it was never intended to be on a cadence. It was just whenever I got them out. But oddly, it just turned into a bi-monthly deal, or bi-weekly, twice a month. And then when I was running those games, like I said, the Apex, I was trying to run them frequently, but I was putting the videos out and I was timing that. Okay, well, I don't want to do 2 videos in 1 week because I don't want to overwhelm people. So that's content twice a week for fun, for hobby. That's a job. That's a and I'll admit I don't pay close attention to my statistics, but I do see them. And during that period, I was seeing a lot of hits. I was seeing a lot more hits than I do now. And admittedly now, family is hit, job has changed, and that's like you said, treating it like a job. I do have a real job, and I need to treat my job as the job, and then the hobby is the hobby. And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but when I stopped producing content and I started seeing numbers plummet, just because it's hard to, it's hard to see 4 blog hits if I don't have 4 blog posts. When I saw those numbers dropping, I took it personally. I felt like it was an insult to my worth, and I let it get to me, and that was part of the contributing factor to me, kind of the mental health episode that I kind of barfed into the back end of an episode lately. That said, word of wisdom to anybody else who is job changing, who has a child in their life that they didn't have before. You're not out of the hobby. You're out of the hobby for now. And I say that in the most encouraging way I can. Because, again, like you, Daniel, I'm trying to play outside of recording. I'm trying to get into some games that I know people who are running, and mixed success. Late nights don't work for me anymore. Saturdays have been working for me, specifically around lunch, because the kids are distracted and I don't have to be at work. But I'm trying, and I'm getting back, and I would like to do this for enjoyment. And I need to do it for enjoyment, not for self-fulfillment. That is, my worth is not in how many blog posts I put out. My worth is not in how many people listen to my podcast or watch the video version. And I may be the only one who has fallen for this trick. But don't let exclusion from the table exclude you from the hobby. Read Appendix N if you can't play. Pick up those solo games or the pick your own adventure books. Engage in other ways, and I want to offer that because that's something I should have told myself 6 months ago or however long it's been. So I don't know if that's where you were going, Daniel, but that's where my brain went, and I wanted to share that with everybody here as a way to encourage people and to build up the community or the hobby or movement.
The other thing, the question about, well, first of all, it would be a great panel, but the traps attacking with that go or whatever, that's something that I do quite a bit actually, especially since I've switched over to chainmail, because I'll simply say, well, it's a spear trap, so it attacks as a spear, wielded by, whatever. I generally just make it as tough as I think I should. I don't know if I have a specific way, but setting it by level is a very good idea.
That's clever. I had not thought about that actually. I had exclusively been thinking about it from the perspective of the alternative combat system as the primary combat system in BX, AD&D, and beyond. So I'd been thinking about it from that perspective, but I'm now going to do that when I get back into running my chainmail-themed games. Spear trap attacks as spear, swinging pendulum attacks as axe. Makes sense to me. Plus, when you consider some of the rock, paper, scissors going on, that may have some interesting differences as it pertains to what armor the party is wearing and who might want to go first.
And of course, it's easy enough when you look at chainmail to just say, at the 4th level of the dungeon, this spear is wielded by a hero, right? And that will make all the difference. You don't have to worry too much about if it's magic or not. If the trap is magical, I'll just use a spell. So, for instance, I recently had a lightning bolt trap, and I just used the lightning bolt spell set at a certain level. And of course, it was able to, because I knew the level it was set at, I knew how much damage it would do, but I also knew what it would take to dispel it, because obviously that's based on the level of the caster. So,
and in the case of a magic trap, if you are using the level of the dungeon to correspond to the level of the magic user necessary to cast the spell, it serves as a natural kind of limitation on what you can do and naturally grades difficulty. It makes lower dungeon levels more dangerous. Now, that's not to say that you can't put a 4th level trap in a 2nd level dungeon. In fact, as we look at the random encounter tables, the possibility for a 4th level creature exists. I think even on the 1st level, it's early morning and I don't have the lights on. I can't read the book that I have next to me, but what's important is just you can have certain elements, and I think you kind of alluded to this at the deciding what would most be appropriate. The natural assumption will be that your traps will be about your level, but there's always the chance that there's a trap that's way, way worse. Or way better.
That worked really well. I like that idea for traps that are weapons, right? Your crossbows, your darts, your spears. Obviously, if it's a pit, that becomes a little more difficult, and you need to use a saving throw or an ability score check or something to that effect, or whatever, however you want to do it, to whether or not they're going to fall in the pit. And I think at that point, while you could have spears at the bottom of the pit, the spears aren't really attacking somebody, so I think I probably would have that be some kind of fixed damage that you would roll on, not necessarily an attack. Although it does make sense that you'd take less damage from the spears if you were wearing plate mail, so I don't know, it's something to think about for sure, but not a place I've really gone. Pit traps aren't something I use very often, so I haven't really experimented too much. I guess the other things would be like a falling block, right? Like, again, that's something that, while obviously I guess your armor would protect you a little bit, if it's a 1-ton block falling from the ceiling, I don't think the difference between being smushed if you're wearing plate and being smushed if you're wearing clothes is going to make too much of a difference.
I agree. Plate may even be a hindrance in that case, because would somebody who is not wearing a helmet be able to see it earlier and react a split second earlier? Or if someone is wearing heavier armor and it's kind of slowing them down, would the person in clothing who is less encumbered be able to escape more rapidly? But I don't want to go down too far into that, because when we get into those kind of granularities, in that way lies madness. Or 3rd edition.
So in that case, it might be, again, some kind of a check versus an ability score, or to die into your ghoul thing, versus, let's say, con. I don't know why it would be con, but, something to that effect. You could use those numbers from con, but shoot them over to dex, let's say, to jump out of the way, right? So if you've got a 13 or better dex, you can jump out of the way. I don't know, is that too easy?
Not necessarily. As I have posted about before, and as you actually released a video about recently, I remember agreeing with you on the ADD, dice pool. So maybe we would use a roll off against dexterity to do something, but you don't necessarily have to do that as a d20. You can do it as a 3d6, and on average, a normal human will succeed there. Or you can do it on 4d6, where on average, a better than average, I wanted to say super normal, but that has game terms. That's a game term. But so someone with better than average stats would need to pass it. I have since given up. The original place where I talked about this on the blog, I was talking about potentially adding dice or removing dice as a replacement for thief skills, but I've since given up on that because it kind of puts too much weight on ability scores. But one thing you could totally do is add the level to the ability. So say this pit is 4d6 versus dex to not fall into, dex plus level. So if I am of average dexterity and I'm level 1, then a 4d6 trap I'm going to fall into more often than I don't. But when I become a hero, that 11 becomes a 14 and 4d6 becomes much more feasible. Have not done the math on that. Probably should. There's an idea for a blog post. Stay tuned. Got some feedback on the last episode. Folks were concerned about the sound quality, that I'm in an echo chamber, which I am, and the sound effects were not particularly thematic. So I'm trying to reduce the sound effects, and I've got a new recorder app. Not using it for this segue, but let's see how it goes.
Hey Taylor, Riley here. Enjoyed your latest episode on one-to-one combat time. You make a compelling argument for quicker combat and less time between you getting to actually play the game. That's hard to argue against. Interestingly, I'm quite happy to sit and listen to other players taking the lead. But when it comes to combat, this definitely changes. I think because typically these long combat turns aren't actually interesting.
Thank you. I thought I was the only one. Not really. That wouldn't have made an episode if I wasn't. But yeah, I'm same page. Like you, I am more than happy to be like an accessory in the background. As the resident introvert, a lot of time I will lean on a caller to drive the adventure. That's perfectly fine by me. I'm here for the ride. I'm here for the companionship. But yeah, combat. Waiting for someone to make a combat decision is just brutal, and I would definitely on your page there. Not something that I would do recreationally. Got to keep that thing moving.
Now, because you asked for disagreements, I'll throw some out. If you have a player that takes minutes on their turn, I think they're still going to have less time than usual between their turns, even if they are attentive to decide what to do. So I can see this causing conflict with slower players. I can see lots of missed turns, and a player might get frustrated quicker than they get quicker at combat. I also think you could have addressed how this could not come across as adversarial, or different ways to help that. I think implementing this in session 0 or similar, with all the players agreeing, would work. But at other points, I feel like players are going to feel targeted, and it could definitely cause issues.
Regarding players feeling targeted, yes, they would be targeted. That's kind of the point. It's about trying to find a rhythm and a style of play that's conducive towards moving the game along and keeping everyone engaged. And like I mentioned in Evil Jeff's call, I just recorded a response to Evil Jeff. I don't know if I'm going to put them in the right order, but that's okay. The gist of it is it varies by player. So some people aren't going to enjoy that. Some people are. Honestly, though, I feel like the people who are going to feel alienated are the ones who are the most likely to want to get out of combat. Because, no, that's not necessarily true. Scratch that. discussing it in your session 0. Admittedly, I tend to do like text message 0. I have yet to participate in or run a session 0 that didn't result in players being disappointed that we weren't actually playing. But who knows? Maybe for folks who can do session 0 and 1 on the same sitting, that works out. But moot point. The point is definitely something to discuss with your group in advance and make sure that everyone's on the same page and that everyone is expecting the same out of the campaign. It would be a shame to bring someone into a high-octane, high-tension dungeon crawler when they were hoping for courtly intrigue and high politics. How to make it not adversarial. I can definitely see how this kind of thing could be considered adversarial, but as with all the rules, it comes down to how it's presented and how it's executed. When I've seen it implemented before, I've seen it implemented aggressively, and I think that would be an adversarial track. Because what is our goal? Our goal is to keep people in the game and keep the game moving. There may be an adrenaline response, an excitement response for the fast pacing, but the goal is to keep it moving, and that adrenaline response should be a positive one. It should be an excitement response, not a fight or flight. So when engaging, what I've done in the past, I don't, slam the chess clock. I don't put the numbers in people's faces, and I don't count out loud. Why do I not do that? Because I've seen it done where people count out loud, and introverts or people who are trying to be polite, they don't want to interrupt. So if you're counting out loud, they're less likely to shout over you in order to get their turn directions across. Similarly, if you're counting out loud, then your player has to amplify so you can hear them, and therefore it's kind of an escalation. As someone who has children, I'm sure I'm sure that you have experienced this before, where one child will get louder and you have to get louder so your wife can hear you, and then they get louder and then there's a baby, and the baby's loud because everybody else is loud and he's participating. And so it's very easy for that to get out of control. It's especially on VTT, where you don't have the directional aspect that you have at a table, where you can turn and talk to somebody next to you and it doesn't interrupt the DM talking to the caller on the other side. So first, I don't say it out loud. Similarly, I don't make aggressive gestures. Like I may count on my hands, because you have to count somehow, but I don't put it in a loud way. I don't do it with a violent motion. I just count, because when you do it with the loud voices or the fast movements, the aggressive movements, that produces a adrenaline response. It becomes a competition. It becomes a fight. And that's not what we want. We want to focus on the game, and it's a collaborative thing. It's not DM versus players. It's DM and players. DM is a player. And so this giant run-on sentence, I may just delete the ands that are coming along. But the moral of the story is, the way to do it without becoming adversarial is, like I mentioned, to clarify the rules of engagement in your session 0 or equivalent, to follow those rules of engagement, and to remember the goal is to keep the game moving and encourage everyone to be involved. And that's the lamest way possible that I just described that. I was like Care Bears and Cuddles for something that in the previous episode came off as kind of in multiple areas like, wow, you're a bad DM, Whispers. But the more, it's all about the goal. If it is a way for you as the ref to force them into a corner, that's adversarial. If it's a way for you to badger them into losing turns, that's adversarial. If it's a way to encourage their participation, that's that's what we're trying to accomplish. And if it doesn't serve that purpose, then it's not right for your table. Like I said in the episode, I think it is right. I think it benefits everyone. I've not had bad experiences with it personally, but I can see how it could be done wrong.
Now, I'd be happy to play in a game like this. I want combat to be fast and furious, and I think this rule would make it feel that way. I don't know if my players would, though. Anyway, keep up the good work. Bye for now.
I would love to have you in mine. Who knows? Maybe one of these days you'll get to try it out at my table. Thank you for calling in. It's good to hear your voice.
Taylor, beautiful Jeff. Hey, your one-to-one clickbait tracking title there. Just listen to that podcast. I like what you said. I've been in situations like that before when you have a lot of players and you need to move things along, go on a dawdle. I've been in games like that. I've not had to run any. The only thing I would say is that it really should be for groups of people who have played before or used to playing. Because I think if you take a person who is new to the game, new to playing RPGs in general, not understanding the flow of things and such, it probably can be a little overwhelming, and it may give them a bad experience. And then you're also going to have those people who want to take all the time in the world, and they're going to have a bad experience if you time them in the first place. But, sucks to be them if that's, what you've already defined in there. So, yeah, good stuff. Look forward to more content. Side note, check your show notes. Looked like your link for SpeakPipe was not working. I had to copy things and paste. Later.
Regarding SpeakPipe, I'll make sure to check it this episode. Sometimes I can miss, but I'm glad you copy pasted and I'm glad you called in. Regarding the time tracking, I think, it came up too. I think regarding the type of game, that's a key element. You mentioned folks who just don't enjoy it, and I think that Daniel over at Bandit's Keep mentioned it in a YouTube video recently where he felt like timers were inappropriate, not necessarily horribly inappropriate, but talk to your players. His line was talk to your players, identify the kind of game that you want to play, and then play it. And that's something that I kind of didn't get in. These episodes, as I've been releasing them, are my episodes that are kind of rushed, and it's not intentional. It's just I don't have time, any time. Like, right? My wife thinks I'm at work right now. But anyway, I digress. I wonder what that red thing is. I'm using a new voice recorder app. It's hopefully it allowed me to wander off because Anchor got rid of the recording in the app itself, which sucks. But I'm using a voice recorder app, so hopefully this is better quality. But what was I talking about? Yeah, it comes down to the kind of game you want to run. And in my personal experience, I like to run kind of like high tension, high action, high excitement. And in the past, I've had a decent amount of role-playing games as well, but it's been a while for me. It's been, I primarily have been playing dungeon crawlers, hex crawlers these last few years. And that's fine. I enjoy that. You folks can call me a board gamer. I'm okay with that. But yeah, it comes down to what is the player's expectation. And with new players, I would honestly try to think of mnemonics for new players. Like one of the things that we used to do with Dungeon Crawl Classics, because your spell was so convoluted, we would print spell sheets. Like your sheet would get printed out, and as you learned it, you would put it into a binder, and that was literally your spell book. And then they could kind of page through it as a player and kind of read through. Index cards work well for that, for D&D type spells, because they're usually a little simpler. than the massive DCC misfires and all that jazz. But yeah, index cards work well for that, character notes, and it underscores the importance of a character sheet that's well organized. Even if it's just a piece of printer paper that you wrote your notes on, make sure your notes are in a place you can find them. And for new players, I can see it. I can see giving them a little bit of leeway. But secretly, the timer is more about just getting them to respond. Like the times I've actually used the timer, I don't keep counting when they're asking me a question, because the idea is engagement. And I mean, if it gets to a certain point, it's like you run out of time, your perception is out, you have to make your decision now. That might I've never had that happen to me, but like it's more about getting their attention and keeping their mind in the game. And if there are other ways to do it, if there are more appropriate ways to do it based on table, and even for new players, I would not want to alienate someone emotionally. I would rather alienate them from playstyle. Now, that's not to say I go out to alienate people on purpose, but if someone is going to reject my table, I want it to be because of the nature of the game. It's just not their taste. I don't want it to be because I'm a jerk. So good thoughts. Thank you for calling in.
Hey there, it's John from the Red Dice Diaries. I've been listening to a few of your episodes recently, specifically the one about turn tracking.
Indeed. Thank you, sir, for calling in. As a note to listener, this is part of several calls John had given me, but I'm trying to limit it to the ones that are most thematically appropriate to the episode, and we're hitting up at that 30-minute mark where I'm trying to keep them. So, more from John next episode, whether he calls in again or not.
Now, as you may or may not be aware, I've been playing Shadowdark a fair bit at the moment, and that's got some real-time mechanics that I'm experimenting with. I tend not to do strict timers on turns, but, if someone takes too long, well, I'm going to be rolling more random encounters while they're waiting and biding their sweet time. Obviously, unless it's in like a sort of high-pressure situation. So they're incentivized to not dilly-dally around too much, otherwise there's more likelihood additional complications, monsters, etc. are going to turn up.
And that's what it's all about. There's a little bit of behavioral modification, but you're not punishing the players. What's more important with timekeeping in the context of a session is keeping flow, controlling action, and making sure that the pacing is on pace for what works with your group and keeps your players engrossed. Regarding Shadowdark, I have not played it. It's not really my style. I prefer the older style games. That is not to call you out. Obviously, you are linked on the OSE page as an example of how to play OSE, so you have BX chops. Well, so not calling you out, but Shadowdark is expressly a link between 5th edition and old school play by its own admission, and that's just not where I am. That is not to come down on people who do enjoy Shadowdark, and I enjoy hearing you talk about your experience with it and your perspective on it. But to my knowledge, based on what I've heard so far, it's not for me. I will stick with the reviews and commentaries.
With regards to the calling, you got off Jason from Nerds RPG Varietycast. I've got to say I sympathise with both of you about life getting in the way. One of the reasons I'm running a drop-in / open table game at the moment is precisely because I don't have time to do more regular campaign games, and the onus in that game is very much on the players to book session slots and sort out what they want to go and investigate, and to let me know in advance. And I'm pulling on lots of existing materials, barrow maze, etc., to try and minimise the amount of prep, although I'm still doing like a fair bit of prep because I just can't help myself. What can I say? It's like some kind of illness.
Friends don't let friends prep campaigns.
But I've also been looking into solo gaming via the Ironsworn rules that a friend recommended to me. I've got a copy of that on the way. to arrive in the post. So hopefully that might be something that I can look into a little bit more after I reviewed a little bit of solo play stuff a good while back now, but I haven't really got around to actually trying a lot of stuff out in practice. So I'm looking forward to having a go at that. And likewise, with the podcasting, I heard someone say that it might be yourself saying that people tend to drop off a bit, when they run out of things to talk about. And I think that's on myself, to be honest, the lack of time. Plus, I've covered all the sort of important and inverted commas stuff that I wanted to talk about in terms of RPGs. So now I'm not really keeping myself to a schedule. I'm just putting up an episode every now and then when I feel I've got something interesting to say.
See, that's where I've got the advantage. Aha! I want to talk about everything and love hearing the sound of my own voice. It's a matter of, it's just a matter of time and editing for me. And equipment. And skill.
Anyway, very much enjoyed the episodes. Keep up the good work. Take care. I'll catch you soon.
Will do. Very glad to hear your voice. Hadn't heard you in a while. Good to know you're still alive. And humorously, I did enjoy that Colin had put out, of Spike Pit fame, had republished an older episode where you and he were talking in it. So, good times. Harkening back to different times. But still good. So, listening back to this, sibilant S's are gone. That's a good thing. I do like the voice recorder that I was using earlier. It's a little bit better than the echo chamber. And regarding trying to equalize, we're, again, just coming up against that skill wall where I am not good at this. But got a little bit of work to do on good transitions. Hey, we'll worry about it when we get there. I appreciate everybody listening this far, and I guess from here I can sign off.
And that wraps up this episode of the Whispering GM podcast, a product of Clericware Ringmail and an independently operated production for educational and informative purposes, released under the Totally Steal This license. Some sound effects are retrieved from Pixabay, made available under the Creative Commons 0. Others are retrieved from Mixkit.co and used under the Mixkit.co royalty-free music license. Theme music is Dirty Blues, composed by Michael Ramir C., retrieved from Mixkit.co and also included under the Mixkit.co royalty-free music license. Parties interested in or with questions regarding the podcast are encouraged to reach out via the methods provided on the Clericware Ringmail blog. Thank you for listening, and delve on.